Property taxes in Texas have long been a hot topic, and this year is no exception. Last week, Governor Greg Abbott signed sweeping new property tax bills into law, Senate Bills 4 and 23 and House Bill 9, that promise relief for homeowners. All three bills will require voter approval in the November 4th constitutional amendment election. However, these bills also introduce a fresh layer of complexity to an already complicated system, especially right here in Houston. For many Houstonians, navigating property taxes, tax assessments, exemptions, and protests can feel like a maze. But the good news? There are real tools and strategies that homeowners can use to better understand, challenge, and even reduce their property tax bills. Joining us today to help us unpack these new laws and what they could mean for you is Ryan Dean, a leading property tax expert from Autoagent.com. Ryan, welcome to Hello Houston. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so a couple of these bills are all about senior relief. If you're over 65,
listen up.
So it's almost a combined, from what I read, Ryan, correct me, $200,000 of relief. So, but explain, does that mean if your property's are assessed at $500,000, you only pay taxes on $300,000? What does that mean?
Yes, that's absolutely what it means. And, there's a whole series of exemptions, and that's what we do at Autoagent is educate the public, because there's so many things that have changed in the property tax world, so many exemptions that are available, and a lot of times people just aren't aware of it. So you're absolutely right. What these bills are going to do is increase the limitations of the value reductions. So how an exemption works, if you look at a property tax bill, you're going to have your assessed value on there, and we'll talk a little bit about how that gets generated. And then you're going to have a series of line items, which are all the different taxing jurisdictions that are part of your area and part of your tax bill with a tax rate next to it. So it's just a simple calculation. Value times the rate equals a dollar amount. So anytime you can reduce that assessed value, it's going to lower the dollar amount due on your tax bill. So if you're over 65, that's huge, because not only can you get a deduction, but you can also lock in that value going forward. And that's huge, because what we've all seen, right, with the values is there's a lot of competition going on right now. Texas is a great place for business. A lot of businesses are moving to Texas for many, many reasons. And what does that do? Jobs. People need housing to work those jobs. So there's all of these property sales going on.
Let me take you back for 1 second, and then you can continue on this. I just want to ask real quickly. I own property, but I'm ignorant to all of this. So what I need to know is this anything I have to actively participate in besides challenging it? But when I get my yearly bill assessment, whatever, is already this calculated in?
No. So if you qualify for an exemption, that is not going to be an automatic process. The government is not going to look at your age and say, hey, congratulations, you're 65, like the mailer you get from AARP, and say, now you have this exemption.
Why does AARP know first before the government does?
Hey, I'm 41. They're already sending me notices, so they're ahead of the game.
Anyway, I cut you off. Please continue.
Yeah. So no, to your point, there are forms that you need to download. And another misconception is a lot of people look at the tax collector office because that's who's sending the tax bills out. But the assessor's office is actually the one controlling the values and controlling the exemptions. So they're typically the one that's going to house all the forms that you can utilize to apply for these exemptions. Texas also has a homestead exemption, which is basically the easiest way to say that to the public is it's basically your primary residence. And that's a huge thing in Texas because it actually does decrease the assessed value or the taxable value. In California, where I am, there is a homestead exemption, but it's more of a liability thing. In case of a lawsuit, it limits what they can come after, but it does not affect our tax bills at all. So these are things that taxpayers in Texas need to be aware of, need to take advantage of to lower their tax bill. Disabled people, you can get up to 100% tax reduction, fully exempt, disabled veteran. Same thing.
Let me
so these are
quickly
very,
ask
very
this
important
then,
things to
and
be
then we
aware
can
of.
move on to the actual bills and such. But so if I am challenging my tax and I go to one of these firms, they're all over the place to challenge your tax, do they then look at all of these and tell you what things you should be getting? Or do you still need to come fully educated and prepared on these exemptions?
So there are a lot of, number one, you don't have to have a firm to appeal your value, to challenge it. But it is a good idea because they know all the ins and outs. They know how to be successful. So they will look at all of these things. So it's kind of two separate things. One thing is challenging the value. And that is them saying, hey, you have used a mass appraisal technique, because if you notice, there's not a Prius pulling up from the county often anymore saying, hey, let's actually get a notebook out, clipboard, and look at this house. They're using mass techniques. It's data driven. They're flying drones over properties, seeing a new deck, a new pool that maybe wasn't permitted. So there's a lot of things that are happening there. And, that value might not be accurate. They don't know what's inside your house if they never visited it. They didn't get up close to it to see that there's issues with the stucco or the roof. So you can challenge that. The thing I always caution people is there are cases where people have gone and challenged the value and actually ended up with a higher value once they actually dug in deep and looked at the home and the property.
Those so Google Maps.
Very careful there.
Yeah.
You're listening to Hello Houston. We are speaking with Ryan Dean, a leading property tax expert. You can join the conversation with your questions for Ryan at 713-440-8870.
So, Ryan, isn't it helpful, at least speaking of drones, for you to do your own research in that regard and say, look, my fence is 20 years old, it needs replacing. My pool is cracked, it needs work. My roof is old, it needs replacing. And go to the tax office and say, yeah, the house across the street's in great shape and it just got built and it's worth $1 million. My house, with all these repairs that I need to be done, is worth only $800,000 or whatever it is. I mean, is that a logical approach?
Absolutely. There's a lot of assumptions being made from a drone perspective. They also fly airplanes in a pattern. It's almost like a miniature U2 program. A lot of people don't know about this. But there's a lot of assumptions being made because even with high resolution photography, they're not able to tell how great a shape that roof is. Everything that you mentioned, they can't see it from that altitude in detail. So it looks like the $1 million house next door. But once you actually get there on site, another thing that you can do as part of your appeal is you can have appraisal done yourself, and you can bring that evidence where they've actually walked around the home, they've actually entered the home. Because let's face it, you can drive down a street and there may be a home that doesn't look amazing on the outside, but they may have spent $300,000 decking out the inside. Now, that's not a house that you want to do an appeal on because they probably are looking at the outside. You don't want to let them come in and see all your marble floors and everything like that.
It's tricky. So this is a crazy question, but it happened to me. So we happen to have a beach place, right? Mm-hmm. And so like a lot of people. Mm-hmm. All right. So, before we got married, we could have two different homestead exemptions, and then when we got married, we lost that because a couple could only have one homestead exemption. And somebody said, "Well, why did you tell everybody you got married?" So, have you ever faced that before? I mean, should two people who have their own homes maybe just not get married if they don't want to?
We do see that from time to time, and that happens in a lot of different ways, actually. I remember being pretty shocked and upset that I went to a wedding and, a lot of money on gifts and everything like that. And then later found out through this whole insurance situation that my brother was involved in as their agent. They were not actually married. The whole thing was a sham. And so we see that a lot. If it's beneficial via taxes or some other assistance, something that they're getting, we see that where they are married, quote unquote, but not actually documented. It does happen.
Yeah, I had an older couple that they got divorced so they could get higher Social Security. I know. They're still together.
Wow. The captain and Tennille. Captain's medical bills were so hard that by getting divorced, he got more coverage. And so that's why the captain and Tennille got divorced.
Wow. Well, we do have a question on YouTube from my British computer guy, and you can ask your questions at 713-440-8870. Ryan, once you apply for a homestead exemption, is it automatically applied every year?
Yes, my understanding is that once you've received that and many other exemptions, they are on a permanent basis. The only thing you need to watch out for is you cannot, as we were just discussing, you cannot apply for another one on another property. That would be a problem if that was found out.
Now, are there any, red flags when somebody might be receiving their appraisal notices, such as, large increase in value, incorrect property descriptions? I know we kind of talked about that a little bit, but how can somebody recognize it if their home looks pretty outside and their home is nice inside?
Yeah, you really need to look at the data, and remember, everything is data driven. And that's what our systems do, is basically give the public a window into their property tax data, because you need to look at that. If you're looking and saying, wait a minute, this is saying 3.5 acres. I don't have 3.5 acres. Maybe this data is from another record. Or there's just something very, very off. You're saying, wow, all of a sudden my structure went up by $200,000. What happened here? Those are exactly the things that are going to cause you to question it. And that's exactly why you would want to go through the appeal process to ask them, how did you arrive at this value? And if they're not able to tell you and it doesn't make sense, that's where you can have your evidence and come back to say, this just isn't correct.
Every year you get these bills, you get the value sent to you and then how much it's going to cost. So you miss challenging it one year. So then the next year comes back even higher. Can you get back and do a do-over? Or once you let one go by, that's been agreed upon theoretically, and now you're stuck with it?
No, so you can appeal at any time, but it's going to be from that point forward. It's not going to go retroactive back.
Right.
But once you catch it, challenge it, and prove your case, that point going forward. But remember, nothing's set in stone. So you're going to improve it for that next tax cycle, but there is a good chance that another increase will be coming your way in the next fiscal year.
So we opened the segment by talking about Senate Bill 4 and 23 and House Bill 9, these new laws, bills that are coming up that we're going to have to vote on. Thoughts on it from your point of view? Are we moving in the right direction in this state? Is this good for home consumers?
Well, so a lot of things led up to these, and the values going up and up. A lot of people are having a difficult time paying those bills, and these Senate bills, they are aiming to reduce the tax dollar liability for the homeowner and also for businesses. And what they've also done, which I really admire, is because there's a huge state surplus right now, billions of dollars, they are actually offsetting any loss. So if you think about it, you have those line items that I talked about on the property tax bill. Those are going to be schools. On every tax bill, there's going to be school districts, sometimes more than one school-related bond on there. And so if you lower everybody's tax bill using these exemptions we talked about by these massive amounts, now you're cutting funding to very important things like schools. Well, what the state has done and will do with this is basically they're going to offset that. So however much that tax dollar is reduced, they're going to pay the difference to make sure these important things like school districts don't lose any money. And I really admire that. That is just such a great thing. We have to keep our schools open and well funded. I heard you guys talking about it earlier, spinning off of the cell phone thing. Schooling is just so important. So it's amazing that they're offsetting that.
Hey, Ryan, I have a call from Quee for you from Houston. Quee, what's your question for Ryan?
I bought a house free at an arm's length transaction. And which means that, it was listed on the market for roughly a year and a half. And I bought it at a certain price, but when I protest, the appraisal district said that the price I bought it at was unqualified. And so I went to the ARB committee, and what they did was they took the HCAD's appraisal price and my purchase price, and they split it in half, but they would not agree to lower my appraisal price to the price that I bought at the market. Are they able to do that? And what ways could I do, or what other ways could I go about to get the appraisal price for what the price I bought for on an open market?
Yeah. It sounds like you got a deal, and the appraisal board said, hey, you got a deal, but that house is worth more than you paid.
Yes, that's what they said.
Yeah. What does he do, Ryan?
Now, did I hear you correctly? You already went through the formal appeals process?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I would actually need to do a little more research. I'm surprised on that, actually. I guess, you don't have to disclose numbers, but I'm thinking you got a heck of a deal. It must have been really, really a substantial discount, because normally I would think you'd have a little more leeway there.
Yeah, I think so. I was told that I can go to one of the appraisal companies where they could do an arbitration, and at that point, they can try to get it lowered for whatever, But at the formal meeting, they just met halfway between what the district was appraising it for versus what I bought it for, and the house was on the market for over a year, close to 2 years.
Well, he might have a case with the reason it was so low. It might have a bad foundation. It might have termites. It might have history of murders. Who knows what?
Hope not.
I hope not.
Yeah, you need to build your case on that, and like you said, I think you need to involve professionals. And what you'll have to weigh is the tax savings versus what it's going to cost to have professionals on your side here. So take a good look at that. I'm sure you could get a free consultation to run that by a professional, and they can let you know whether or not it'd be worth it to enroll their help.
All right, Ryan, tell your brother hello.
Ryan Dean is a leading property tax expert from Autoagent.com. Ryan, thank you for joining us today on Hello Houston.
Thanks for having me.